Hi, my name's Trev Hutchings and this is the Tascam US16X08 audio interface. Inside the box you get the audio interface itself, a manual, a USB cable, a power supply, and a few different adapters for different countries. You also get two end adapters so that you can convert this audio interface from a standalone, as it comes normally, to one that can be rack mounted. Also included in that is these four little screws that are used when you convert it from a standalone to rack mounted. And to take the end panels off, you get this little Allen key that undoes the screws that hold the end panels on. On the front panel, we've got first here at this end, we've got the on standby switch. Next to that we've got two switches here for phantom power. The top one switches the phantom power on for the first four of these XLR sockets, and the second switch turns on the phantom power for the second four of these XLR sockets. There are 8 XLR sockets along the front here in total, which make up the first 8 inputs. Then we've got 2 more inputs on the end here. These are single jack inputs, 1/4 inch jack, and both of these have got switches next to them so you can switch them from line to instrument. Next along from that we have a row of 10 gain controls. The first 8 of these gain controls control the volume levels or input levels of these XLR input sockets, and the last 2 of the gain controls control the input volume of these 2 mono jack inputs. Finally, along the front here we've got a line output level control. This controls the level output from output sockets 1 and 2. That's the stereo pair. And on the end we have the phono input, which again is this time is a stereo 1/4 inch jack input with its own level control. Okay, so now on the back of this end we've got the USB connector. This is where you connect in the USB cable. Then we've got 2 DIN sockets, because this audio interface could also is a MIDI interface as well. So you've got 2 MIDI inputs, sorry, 2 MIDI ports. One is the output and one is the input. Then you've got on this top line here, you've got 3 lots of paired jack inputs, so that's 3 stereo jack input groups. Each of those pairs have got their own level switch, which switches it between minus 10 dBV and plus 4 dBu. Below that you've then got 4 pairs of mono jack inputs, so there's effectively 4 stereo outputs, and these are the line outputs. Now the switch on the front that controls audio level, output, volume, only controls these 2 here, 1 and 2 here, so you haven't got a level output control on the front for these 3 sets. You'll also notice that there is no gain control for these 3 stereo inputs. Over here we've got a audio power save switch, which you can switch to on or off, which allows the machine to go into an auto save. Then along from there you've got this cable clip, and finally on this end we've got the socket for connecting the power adapter cable for power. When this is not connected to a USB port, this can be used as a mic preamp. What that means is that when you connect a microphone to one of the XLR ports at the front, it runs through, uses the preamp and comes out the back through one of the output sockets. That is to say that if you put a microphone, plug a microphone into input 1, that will run through, use the mic preamp in here and come out of jack that's marked, the jack output that's marked 1 on the back here. If you connect a microphone to jack input, say input 6, that will run through the mic preamp and come out of the jack output on the back, number 6. If you want to convert this Tascam from being standalone to being rack mounted, you're going to need to find yourself a screwdriver with a Phillips style head. But first you're going to need the little Allen key that comes with the Tascam, and you're just going to need to go, there's 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're just going to need to have to slot the Allen key into the middle of these screws and take them out. And then that just literally comes off the end now. And to put this rack plate on, you need to have it so that the sticky out bit of the rack is sticking out away from the Tascam. And then you've got basically 2 holes that you can use. Only 2 holes actually come up. And the reason there's 3 holes on the back of this, on this plate for screwing in, is because these plates are not ended, so you can use either plate on each end. That's the only reason why there's 3 holes that I can work out. I'll just get that screwed in there. I find it a little bit strange that they've used screws with hexagonal ends for the standalone plates, but you have to use a screwdriver for these screws that hold the end plates on for the rack. It would have been slightly more intelligent that both sets of screws used the same Allen key, but there you are. And that's it really, simply, that's it. So once you've connected the Tascam US16X08 to a Windows or a Mac computer, you'll need to install the Settings Panel software from the Tascam website, and this is the Settings Panel software. Now on here you'll see that there are 3 tabs along the top section here, and just above the tabs you've got 3 headings. The scene memories, these allow you to save all these settings, so if you make changes to these settings here you can save them in the scene memories, and you've got 10 of those. Now before I actually get into explaining this first tab, Mixer, I want to explain the other 2 first, and you'll see why as I go through it. So I'm going to go to the second one first, which is Interface. On here you can see the firmware that I'm using, and there's the device name, and there's the sample rate that I'm using. The buffer size that I'm using is here, and I can adjust this buffer from here depending on how much latency I want to work with versus how much reliability I want from the audio interface. But the most important one here from the offset is this one here, which is Mixer True Bypass. If it's switched to on, it means that when you're in the mixer you'll see at the top here it says bypass, which means none of these settings here are going to work. So you need to turn bypass off, so click on off to turn the bypass off, and you go back to the mixer and you'll see it no longer says bypass there. Okay, so now moving on to the third tab, the output settings. Down here you see that it says from computer door, and you see these purple lines. So that's the sound coming from your computer. So if you start your door up and then you start playing some sound from your door, that will now come down these lines and go straight out to whichever of these outputs you've selected in your door. These are the physical outputs on the back of the Tascam, and this is what is being sent to those physical outputs. And you'll notice that the phone headset here and the line out volume control on the front panel are both connected only to the line out 1 and line out 2. Now over here we've got the front panel, and you'll see that it says this little bit of the mixer bit here. So all the front panel inputs and the back panel inputs all are connected to the stereo bus, which runs here. Now if you look here you'll see that these 2 lines run here to the stereo bus. So the output from the stereo bus is a combination of the inputs and the output from your computer. So it's a mixture of the 2. Now you might have noticed earlier when I was going through the switches on the front and back panels that there wasn't a switch for direct monitoring, but you can't actually do that physically on the Tascam US16X08, and the way to get the direct monitoring switched on is you have to connect this stereo bus into the outputs, and the way to do that is to click on computer 1 here and go to master L, and then go down to line 2 and click on that, and then put that to master R. And now the sound that comes out of line 1 out 1 and 2 will be a mixture of any sounds that you play from your door combined with any sounds that are coming in to your Tascam. So if you are like plugging in a microphone and you want to sing along to something you've already recorded, but you want to hear in your headphones your voice at the same time as the music, then this is how you need to set it up. Okay, so now that I've explained that, I can go back to Mixer, and the Mixer is made up of 2 main parts. You've got this section here, which is the equalizer and compressor, and the buttons for the equalizer and compressor here for each of the tracks. And there's also one there for phase, where you can switch the phase if you want to for each of the tracks. Then there's the second part, and this is this section here, which is the solo mute buttons and the pan control and the faders for the volumes of each of the tracks. If you click on mute,
to mute a particular track, it doesn't stop you recording that track. All it does is stops the sound of that track being passed along the stereo bus. So these faders only affect monitoring. If you want to actually change the volume of the input, you have to do that by the knobs on the front of the Tascam. You can't do it here. If I move this slider here up and down, you'll notice that the volume on this, because this is the one I'm using for this mic at the moment, it isn't being changed. Solo literally allows you to just solo that particular one. Now the other section, and this is the equalizer section, any changes you make to this will affect the sound that's being recorded directly, and the same with the compressor. So if you want to set up the equalizer or compressor for a particular channel, you have to click on this heading here. So if I want to do it for channel 1, then I click on analog 1 here, and if I want those to actually be recorded, I can click on the EQ and the compressor, and now this will make these functions actually part of the recording. So if I was to adjust these, they would affect the recording on this microphone. If I go along here to 10, you'll see that here I've changed the compression on the guitar, and that can be set with these settings here, and the equalizer with these ones here. Once again, this volume control at the end here, this master control volume, it doesn't affect the recording levels. This is a microphone test of a dynamic headset microphone that is plugged into input number 1, which is an XLR input.
So, is the Tascam US16X08 worth buying? Well, there are cheaper alternatives, but it is a very well made piece of equipment. So I would say that if you do need all these extra inputs, there are enough XLR inputs on the front of this to connect a microphone and still have 7 XLR inputs left to mic up a 5-piece drum kit. The ability to use phantom power is important if you're miking up a drum kit, because you're going to need normally 2 overheads that normally need phantom power. So that's really cool in that respect. The 2 extra sockets there mean that you can put a guitar and a bass guitar plugged in at the same time. If you're using the right software, you can record all those tracks all at once. I've certainly recorded all the drum tracks all at once and had no problems whatsoever with this machine being able to cope with doing many tracks at once. So overall, I do like the piece of kit. It all works really nicely. If you're in the business of requiring lots and lots of inputs, because this has got 16 inputs, and possibly if you're someone who actually does want 8 outputs, which this has got, yes, I would say this is definitely worth buying. If you've enjoyed this video, do give us the thumbs up and click on that subscribe button. Cheers.